Welcome to the Manifestation Method. I'm your host, Ayelet Polonsky, therapist, coach, and Jewish neo-shaman. Here we blend the wisdom of psychology, spirituality, and Kabbalah to empower you with tools for living your most authentic life, filled with love, abundance, and healing. Through somatic, narrative, and hypnotherapy, I've developed the manifestation method to guide your soul's transformation and the realization of your true self. Let's rise together. To dive deeper into manifesting your most authentic life, visit ayeletpolonsky.com. Welcome, everyone, to the Manifestation Method podcast. I am really, really psyched about today's guest, Sabrina Bendory, not just because I love her content, but I really just appreciate her as a human being. We launched a course together. It was like 2 years ago, something like that.
I was still pregnant with my baby.
You were still pregnant with
Yeah.
that's right. I was like, how are you doing this? But
I know.
she is a warrior woman. And just like working with her is a pleasure. She's so authentic. What you see is what you get. And she really, really loves what she does. And the course we did together 2 years ago was like just so fun. We had so much fun doing it. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not just having a really big influencer on the podcast, but also a friend. But before we jump in, let me go ahead and brag a little bit about Sabrina so you all know who you're about to hear from. So, Sabrina is a pioneering blogging entrepreneur who is globally recognized as a dating and relationship expert. She co founded a website, A New Mode, where she wrote relatable and insightful articles about relationship dynamics that have helped millions of women achieve the love they desire. Today, Sabrina is one of the most authoritative and popular sources for dating advice on TikTok and Instagram, with just about 150,000 followers on Instagram and 211,000 followers on TikTok. She also publishes weekly columns on relationships for Thought Catalog and is a sought-after life coach. Her best-selling book, You're Overthinking It, Find Lifelong Love by being your true self, was published in 2023 by Thought Catalog Books and is the ultimate guidebook to life and dating. Thank you, Sabrina, for having this conversation with me.
Well, thank you for having me and for that amazing introduction.
Totally, totally. So let's just jump in because I know so many of our listeners, I mean we share a lot of similar audiences in terms of
Mhm.
what people find to be like the number one biggest topic that they want to hear about, which is love, dating, relationships. I know most of my clients, when they come for manifesting, the number one type of client I get is I want to manifest my partner, my lifelong partner.
Mhm.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you even got into this field? Like, why are you so passionate about it?
Well, it definitely was born out of my own disastrous love life and feeling so disempowered and feeling so blindsided over and over again. And then getting into these toxic relationships and just wanting love so badly and not understanding where I was going wrong. And so that's kind of how it started. And then it really picked up when I tried to get back together with a very toxic ex-boyfriend, and I thought the way to do that was to make him jealous by talking about how all these men are after me and I was so good at playing the game. And he was like, "You should write a book about this, like teach other women how to do this." And then we ended up starting a website, and then I became a relationship writer.
I love just like the synchronicity in all of that, right?
Right.
It's like you were trying to get him back and then you ended up creating this whole business model together.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so I think it's safe to say you just had a business relationship with him after that.
Yes, it was definitely sloppy and messy. That is like a whole discussion for another time. In the beginning, though, I mean, I was so young. I was 22. What did I know about life? But I was having these experiences and I was basically just writing about them And just having that was powerful because women were reading it and they just felt understood. And this is, I'm like a dinosaur now. There was no TikTok, there was no Instagram. This was, I had a blog, and we didn't have that larger sense of community and connection. So women would read my content and just feel so seen. And so that's where it started. Then in time, I developed my expertise. I was really studying relationships, interviewing men. I had this anonymous survey. Anytime I would meet a guy, any guy that I knew, I would just send it out to them. I would do face-to-face interviews with men, and I would just study the dynamics of relationships. So eventually I went from this clueless, naive girl just sharing her story to like, I can really help you guys. Like, I've learned a lot and I have a lot to share. And then over the years, I ended up getting married and having 4 children. And there are people who are still with me from 2009, which is pretty crazy.
So, hearing that, it leads me to believe that there really is a science to dating. Like, there is
Mhm.
a way to do it.
Yes,
It's not just two people meet and all of the butterfly feelings come, and that's how you know. But there's really a methodology to this.
absolutely.
Okay, so what would you say are some of the biggest pain points you see in modern dating and relationships, and how can individuals navigate them effectively?
I think the biggest pain point that I see is a lot of women sell themselves out or choose the guy or the relationship over themselves. And the reason they do that most of the time is a lack of self worth. For a very long time, I thought the issue was lack of knowledge. I thought if we could just understand men and how they operate, then we'll have the upper hand, we as women. So I spent so many years going down that path, but then I realized, yeah, I was great at using what I learned to reel guys in. I was a master at this. I could get them to like desperately ache for me and want me. And we'd go on a few dates and then they would lose interest and they'd be gone and I'd be ghosted. I'm like, how did this happen? It's because, okay, I understood the male psyche and I understood how to spark that desire, but I was so lacking in self worth that there was nothing it's like I became repulsive. I went from being super attractive to repulsive because I had no self-worth and because I was outsourcing the task of feeling good about myself to somebody else. I thought as soon as I have a boyfriend. And so many women that come to me will say to me like, I feel like you made that video for me, like this is my life. It's such a shared struggle of women all over the world lacking in self-worth, and then we abandon ourselves to try to be enough for a guy for whatever reasons, and then it doesn't work out, and then it kind of affirms these stories that we're already carrying about ourselves. And unfortunately for most of us, it's I'm unworthy of love, I'm not good enough, my true self isn't enough. And then the cycle continues and repeats itself. And so I realized that by changing the way we relate to ourselves and by building our self-worth and by completely changing the way that we think, because I love the quote that you always share, which is like where thoughts go, energy flows, which
Hmm.
is so true. And
Hmm.
most of us send our thoughts to like, I'm going to end up alone, what am I going to do, all the good ones are taken. We keep ourselves stuck in this very fear-based place. And so that's where most women are going wrong. And the way to redirect is to really, instead of focusing on what apps I should be on and getting out there and how am I going to find the guys, is really focusing on the inner, on the internal.
Yeah, totally, totally. I really, really relate to that because for me, when I was 8 years old, and I know if you remember this story from when we did our course
Mhm.
together, right? When
It's
I was when I was 8 years old, I had my crush on a boy, my first crush on a boy named Tommy, and he came up to me one day during recess, looked me in the eyes, and he said, "Ayelet, I don't like you, not even a little bit. Get that through your thick head."
oh,
Right?
brutal
So brutal,
for me.
totally shattered like the vision, like the innocence that I had, the
Yeah.
vision that I had for love and for connection, and even just like creating this whole narrative beyond just lack of self-worth that it embedded in me as a seed that got planted as a result of that experience. But it
Hmm.
created this like bigger narrative that like boys can't be trusted, right? And that
Yeah.
was like a self-protection mechanism. Like I didn't want to get too close to any boy because God forbid I'd relive that initial trauma that I experienced with Tommy. So
Yeah.
I think you're just so spot on with it really comes down to lack of self-worth. Now, I will just say full disclosure, we're releasing with the listeners here for the first time that Sabrina and I are going to be launching a free webinar together at the end of this month, and it's going to be all about how to manifest lifelong love. And Sabrina will bring like the expertise and like the actual methodology to dating and how to navigate that effectively, and I'll be bringing in the manifestation perspective, like how to become a vibrational match for that which you want to call in. And so I know we'll go a lot deeper in the course in talking about how we actually rewrite those stories and these narratives. But just to give people a little bit of substance here, how would you say your listeners, our listeners, can really rewrite that narrative? Because 8 years old, I'm so young, a boy breaks my heart, that creates layers and layers and layers of belief now in me that I have about myself. How do we undo that?
Okay, so while you were telling the Tommy story, it made me think of my childhood. And I was best friends with the most beautiful girl in the grade, the most popular. And every time I had a crush on a guy, they always wanted her. Always, every time. And it was crushing. It was crushing. I would like, and this was beyond the elementary school years. This was through middle school. This was through high school. They always wanted my best friend. And I imprinted this story in my head that, like, I am never going to be good enough for the guys I want. They are always going to want someone else. And I manifested that pretty much because my earliest relationships were being the guys discarding me and going for some other girl. And in my mind at the time, I couldn't zoom out and see, oh, maybe it's because I'm kind of emotionally sloppy. I'm a bit needy. I'm a bit too desperate. This is not the right relationship. This isn't the right guy. Instead, I saw it as, well, yeah, of course. Like, I'm just not good enough, because that was the story that was always there. And the subconscious mind is always looking to prove itself right. And this is, I guess, well, you're the manifestation expert more than me, but this is the heart of manifestation. Like, we can put ourselves on a certain path. It was only with doing work on myself that I completely shifted to a mindset of everything works out for me. I am amazing. I am such a catch. I have everything going for me. And once I truly internalized that, I was the ultimate man magnet. Like, everybody wanted me, and this
Mhm.
was when I started dating my husband. But even if I hadn't been dating him, I had like five guys in line behind him. That wasn't my story for a long time before that. Before that, it was always me chasing, I felt like. And now all of a sudden I was attracting. And the only thing that changed was my mindset. I really, really committed to changing the way that I saw myself, because for so long, the story, and there's so many layers to why that was, I had like 20 Tommies, I feel like. I felt like that was such
Same.
a story for me. And it really, for such a long time, I knew what to do. Like, I knew what to do. I wasn't doing it. And I think the biggest gift that you can give, and what I strive to give my listeners, and definitely I'll be doing this in the webinar that we do, is not just telling you what to do.
Mhm.
It is inspiring you to implement. That is the key to success, to become someone who implements. It's like saying to someone, oh, like, you want to feel better, healthier, have better skin, you got to drink water. And people are like, yeah, 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 uh-huh. But are you doing it? Are you implementing it? Are you making a plan? Do you have the tools? Do you have the strategies to, like, get yourself to do the things that you need to do? And
Mhm.
so, sorry, that was a very long answer to your question, but that's the
That was
way.
the perfect answer to my question. Like,
Okay.
keep going.
That's what it essentially comes down to.
100. I couldn't agree more. And I would even say, like, I love what you said about, the subconscious, because from a manifestation perspective,
Mhm.
we manifest according to our subconscious commitments,
Mhm.
right? So what I see a lot are women who come to me and they say, I want to manifest my soulmate.
Mhm.
Right? Because from a conscious perspective, what they're aware of is this is what I want and I want it yesterday. Right. But are they aware of what's going on underneath the iceberg, which might be what I call conflicting desire? Right.
Mm.
And those conflicting desires can look like, I'm afraid of losing my freedom. I'm
Mhm.
afraid of sharing a home with someone and them telling me how to decorate or how to live in my own space. I'm
Mhm.
afraid of losing my identity or my identity changing, right? There's a lot of subconscious narratives that are going on beneath the surface that if we are not addressing them and pulling them to the surface and then alchemizing them or rewiring them, we are going to be manifesting what we are a subconscious match for, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, wow. Now, what would you say are your personal recipes for dating success? Like, if you could leave women with, let's say, three main, one to three, let's say one to three, like really powerful dating tips,
Mhm.
what would they be?
Number one is pour your energy into creating a life that you absolutely love. Set meaningful goals for yourself because this is how we build our self esteem. Like, be it learning how to cook from scratch, which is like a big trend right now, or challenging yourself to run a half marathon or run a marathon or learn another language. It's very important that you pour energy into creating a life that you love, into making yourself an interesting, well rounded person. You also really want to focus on healing. A lot of the times we think, oh, the right person will heal me. And to some extent, yeah, they can help in your healing, but you need to take control over what is under your control. And we can't always control exactly when we're going to meet our soulmate, unless you're Ayala and can manifest your soulmate in 21 days. But,
Which I'm
and
going to teach you in the course how to
yeah,
do, by
and
the
she
way.
will teach us her ways, but we can't always manifest it to the minute. Well, Ayala's going to teach us how, but most people, you know, but we need to take ownership of what is under our control. So, what is under your control? Sitting around thinking, oh my God, my biological clock is ticking, and what am I going to do? What am I going to do? That is just going to make everything worse because now you're stressing yourself out, and that is going to affect everything in your life. Instead, think, okay, what can I take control of? So, in terms of babies and biological clocks, I know a lot of women worry about that. I can control being healthy. I can control being in shape because that's what's going to boost my fertility. I can control taking certain supplements. Like, there are certain supplements that can help with that. I can control either going and freezing my eggs, or if I can't afford to freeze my eggs, I can make a financial plan to put money aside so that I can do that. Okay, now I feel better. Now I don't feel like I'm dating from a place of like fear and urgency to find someone. Like, okay, I'm taking action. I'm taking control over my life. Okay, you said three things. I don't even know how many I put in that. Oh, next is you have to date with intention. You
Hmm.
can't just follow the chemistry, follow your heart, because that could lead you to the depths of toxic dumpster fires. I know, I've lived it. You have to have a vision. You have to have a sense of what kind of life do I want? What do I want my home to look like? What do I want it to feel like? What kind of values do I want to raise my children with? What kind of, if you want children, what kind of role model do I want for my kids? You need to think about, like, what are my values, what's important to me, like your must-haves, your deal breakers. You have to date with intention. You have to be smart about it. It's not the movies. We're not living in the movies where you're going to see someone and you're going to be like struck by lightning and you're going to know that's the person for you. And if you do feel that way, then alarm bells should ring, because usually that's coming from an unhealthy place. Usually that's coming from a place of unhealed wounds and trauma, and your subconscious is like, yes, yes, this reminds us of our daddy issues, so let's date him and then maybe we can heal. Like, that's usually what's going on. So you have to be very, very clear on what it is you want. You need to have standards and you need to stick to those standards. Do not sell yourselves short.
Yeah, wow. Really, really, really good. And like I would even go as far as to like um on the last point, get clear about what you want. And then from a manifestation perspective, write it down.
Yeah, yeah, you got to write it down.
You
Yes.
got to write it down, put actual pen to paper, because there's something in that materialization of putting it into like 3D form, which you're doing when you put pen to paper, that sends information to the quantum field or the field of infinite possibility, telling the universe, I know what I want, right?
Yes. Yes. One of my clients, she was having a really, really hard time. And so she decided to stay in on a Friday night and drink some wine and make a vision board, which I don't know if you do vision boards. I've never done vision boards. I'm very into more like talismans, like around your house. Like, if you want to manifest, getting engaged or your soulmate, having like the Tiffany's book of ring styles, or like lingerie you're going to wear in your wedding, just things around your house. But anyways, she was like into the vision boards. She made this vision board and we worked together and we built up her self-esteem and really got her past the fear-based space. And she had such a clear vision of what she wanted. And then just before her 40th birthday, she had been dating a guy for a while, like right after we finished working together. And she was like, Sabrina, I had all these places that I wanted to travel to with a partner, and we're finally checking the last one off the list. Like, the last one was Vegas. Like, she manifested everything. I mean, it is unbelievable. And I have so many stories like that from my clients. So it's very, very important to get crystal clear on what that vision is.
Yes. And to those of you who are listening who are into doing vision boards, I should say I made a board years ago. It's at my childhood home, like in my parents' house. That's how old it is. I forgot I even had it. I got married, moved into this house. Okay, I'm talking like 15 years later. Go back and search through my parents' basement for like old tchotchkes of mine. I find the vision board. Everything to the T to how my like bohemian dress looked at my wedding was on that vision board. My home with the window overlooking the backyard was on my vision board, which I have now in the home that I live in. Right? The way that my ring looked, my engagement ring was on my vision board. It's the exact ring that I have on my finger now. I forgot about all those details. And one really, really, really important thing to make this vision board effective is to actually feel into the frequency of what those images on the board make you, how do they make you feel? While you're doing it, feel as though you're wearing that wedding dress, right? See yourself wearing the ring on your vision board. What does it feel like in your body to walk around the rooms of your house that are on your vision board, right? Really feel into the vibrational frequency of emotion that you're putting onto your board. That'll make it come to life and it'll actually create a more magnetic field that can draw your desire into reality. Yeah.
That's amazing. I need to make one, I think.
Yeah. Why don't we do it
I
together?
have things that I still want to manifest.
Why don't we actually create a vision board party
Oh my
together and
gosh, yes.
we'll invite everyone. Okay,
I
you're all
love it.
invited. Amazing. All right. Now, what do you believe are the most common struggles that people face in dating today? Like I hear a lot of women say, I'm on all the dating apps, but because there's so many options, right? Men aren't actually committing. So stuff like that. Like what are some of the biggest struggles and how can we overcome them?
So I think that a lot of women impose the struggle on themselves. Like for example, if you're already in a place of scarcity, you kind of create that. Okay, so what I mean is I'll see women who are in their 20s say, it's just too hard to date because guys in my age range are too immature and they're too unfocused. Women who are a bit older will say there's no one to date because all the good guys are taken. Women who live in the city will say there's just too many options and nobody wants to settle down. Women in the country will say there's no options, there's nobody around. And I always laugh about this in my discovery calls because I'll hear women be like, oh, in Australia, it's just impossible to date. In London, it's impossible to date. In New York City, it's impossible to date. Outside, and it's just like, it's not the place.
Right.
It's not because are people around you getting engaged and coupled up? Yes. So it's not the place. It typically is the mentality. And so, yeah, the apps, we can look at it from a perspective of, oh, this is a nightmare. And you swipe and you swipe and you start a conversation, then you never hear this person again. It doesn't serve you to look at it in that light. Instead, look to the benefits of what it has to offer and look at the benefits in your situation. If you're young, okay, the world is your oyster, like you can date up and you have so many options. If you're older, I mean, unfortunately, the divorce rate is so high these days that there are so many men who are out there again for the second time around. And maybe you do have a more narrow dating pool, but maybe that's not a bad thing. That's probably a good thing. So you have to just focus on what benefits there are. Another tip that I meant to say earlier with like your dating tips, for people is you got to push yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone. Dating is in large part a numbers game. So like get out there, just out there in the world. If you work from home, go work in a coffee shop. Go push yourself to join a golf club or a bowling league or a softball league or something, because everyone has a network. So maybe you won't meet your particular guy there, but you'll meet a girl who has a brother that's perfect for you or a coworker. Just get out there, volunteer. The more you're out there, the more you maximize your chances of finding the right person. You kind of have to push yourself outside of your comfort zone a bit.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to the story you're telling yourself. I know for me, the biggest shifts happened when instead of seeing limitations, and I had all kinds of limitations around me. Guys are too intimidated by me. I'm a relationship writer. They're scared I'm gonna like write about them after we date. Or I'm too much. I'm too much in my masculine. I have to dial myself back down to my feminine. I'm too successful. I'm too damaged. I'm too broken. My attachment style is a mess. Like nothing's ever I was imposing all those limits on myself. And it was only when I undid the story that I was telling me about me that everything changed. And all of those obstacles were not obstacles anymore.
Hmm. I love that. And I really, really love the piece you said about putting yourself out there. I mean, I love everything you just said, but like
Thank you.
putting yourself out there. And one thing I would even add is like, it's one thing to put yourself out there, but it's because we can go to coffee shops, we can go to libraries, we can go to
Mhm.
museums, but we can do it with horse blinders on. And we kind
Right.
of create this like energetic shield that tells the world we're like not approachable or we're
Mhm.
closed off. Right. And
Mhm.
so in the free webinar that we're going to be offering in the hypno activation, which includes hypnosis, visualization, and NLP, it's a guided meditative visualization, super powerful. It's super rewiring. And what it's going to be doing is going to be actually shifting your vibrational field to one that has an open heart. Right. So it opens your field to make you approachable, right? To make people want to be magnetized towards you, which is, I think, a big piece to putting yourself out there. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So you mentioned earlier that you recommend really doing like the inner work, the healing. When you say that, I imagine that a lot of women have this understanding or this belief, like I have to be healed before I meet my partner. Can a traumatized person find their partner, get married?
Yes, absolutely. But it will just make things harder. It will just make things harder. And that's why, look, you're never going to be 100% healed. Am I 100% healed? No. Every day with every challenge of motherhood, of life, of running a business, I mean, there are wounds that get activated all the time. So it's important at least to have a framework, at least to have the tools and the skills to recognize the work that needs to be done, to understand what your triggers are, to understand how to have a healthy relationship, what that means, how to have a healthy relationship with yourself and with a partner, which I will definitely be talking about when we do our free webinar together. So, yeah, traumatized people find relationships all the time. But the thing is, if you are still pretty unhealed, then your personal problems will become relationship problems. And then you're setting yourself up for a very difficult relationship.
Mhm.
Relationships all have difficulties, even the best relationships have their hardships. So we want to make it as smooth of a road as we possibly can. And that's why it's so important to take responsibility and ownership for your hurts, your traumas, your attachment styles. And if you are still completely traumatized, it's just very hard to be fully open and vulnerable and able to trust someone else. I mean, it really depends on the context and the background of what somebody has been through. It just makes it all harder and much more challenging than it needs to be.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we're all somewhere on a spectrum of having been traumatized in some way,
For
whether
sure.
it's like lowercase t trauma or
Mhm.
uppercase t trauma. And we're all going to inevitably bring that trauma with us into our marriage, right?
Mhm.
But one thing that I always say is like, regardless of the level of trauma you have, if you are on a trajectory where you are doing the inner work and you are committed to a lifetime of doing that inner work,
Mhm.
then find someone who is also doing the work, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're alone doing the inner work in the dynamic of a relationship or a partnership, you will find yourself hitting a brick wall if you are the only one in the partnership who is committed to doing the inner work,
Absolutely. Yeah,
right?
that's why I mean in my list of must-haves, I always say like you or even my list of red flags, I say somebody who is not growth oriented is like the ultimate red flag.
Hmm.
And a growth oriented person is the ultimate must-have because no matter what issues you face, as long as that person is committed to growing and working on themselves, you most likely can overcome it. But if someone's like this is how I am, this is how I've always been, take it or leave it, it is very hard to be in a relationship with someone like that.
Totally. Number one. It was the number one thing I was looking for in a partner when I
For sure.
manifested my husband. Like, number one. I'm like, is
Same
he?
here.
Yeah, yeah. So that being said, what are some red flags in dating that people should be aware of?
Okay, well, definitely, like we just said, somebody who's not growth oriented, somebody who does not take any accountability. So, like in talking about their past relationships, the reason why those failed is always somebody else's fault. They have no, they weren't responsible for any of the demise. Somebody who's selfish. It's very hard to be in a relationship with a selfish person who's just living life in their own terms. Love bombing. That's definitely something you need to watch out for. But I think that women have become so scared of love bombing that if a guy is just showing any amount of interest, they're like, is he love bombing? I mean, I have a client who almost dumped a guy because he was using a lot of emojis and she thought that that was love bombing. She's like, it's just too much. I'm like, he just really likes you. Relax. And things worked out very well for them. They're actually like going to be getting engaged soon. But
Oh.
she was freaked out about it because people are so paranoid about the love bombing. With the love bombing, it is the amount of affection and attention and adoration he's showing me in proportion to how well we know each other. And if you barely know each other and he's showering you with like, I could see you as the mother of my children, then okay, there's probably something else going on here. Because as much as I would love to believe that I'm just so incredible that a man will just fall head over heels in love with me at first sight, that's not really how it works. So we want to be cautious of love bombing. You want to be cautious of somebody who's too controlling, controls what you wear, who you hang out with, is dismissive of your life, your lifestyle, thinks that you should have another job or you should live somewhere else. Like you really want to be mindful of that. Somebody that you can't trust, somebody that you just don't feel safe with. And above all, somebody who does not want the same kind of relationship that you want. This is, or the same things out of life. You know, I see women just try to convince themselves that they want something that they don't want. For example, like if you want to have a family and you're dating a divorced dad of 3 kids who is just done and it's like that phase of my life is over, I do not want kids. Don't say, well, maybe once we really fall in love, like I can get him to change minds. No, that's not what he wants. And if this is what you want, then you need to take the facts as they are presented right in front of you.
Love that. Yeah, absolutely. And that being said, when a woman starts to date, I know a lot of people, women, men, doesn't matter, like they're looking for a certain type of feeling, right? They're looking for the intense butterflies. I call it lust, right? Like that feeling of lust and the polarity that gets created in the game of dating, right? And sometimes that could be actually like a trauma bond, and we're not
Mhm.
even aware that that's what's going on, right? Those what I guess I don't know if there's like a percentage of how much passion a person should be feeling, but I know you said, and I really agree with this. If you're feeling too much intensity at the beginning, like just that, like that fiery connection, it can also be a red flag. So,
Mhm.
what is the gauge? How do we know when it's a healthy, wholesome relationship versus something that could potentially be toxic?
Okay, well, healthy relationships typically build slowly. So yeah, you do have that initial rush of excitement and oh my God, he texted me and that has me fluttery. But typically, the more you get to know each other, the more that attraction builds. When it's just an immediate obsession and need to and just thinking about that person constantly and unable to do anything else, which I mean the technical term is limerence, then that's usually coming from an unhealthy place. And you need to ask yourself, like, why am I so obsessed with someone I barely know? I don't really know this person. What is it that I'm really latching onto here?
Hmm.
A lot of the time, it's they represent something to us. It's not anything about them. Like my famous obsession story is this guy, Sebastian, that I met at Coachella, who I became obsessed with after like one conversation, not even a conversation. I just saw him. Why? Because he was so cool and he just like had it together and he was hot. And growing up, none of the hot guys ever wanted me. And this was a guy that could clearly have any girl. And he was showing me a little bit of attention. And I was like, if I can get him to want me, then that will be the ultimate validation. And I was so obsessed in trying to win him over. And I knew nothing about him. I knew like some of the bands that he liked and like that he like worked in tech. I didn't know anything about him. So that's what we need to look at. We need to look at how locked in am I to this person and why? Like, why are they stirring so much within me? Is this a pattern? Have I been drawn to people like this in the past? this is what the inner work is. People always ask me, they're like, what's this inner work? You're always talking about it. It is going to the inner. It is understanding your motivations, your triggers. Why am I drawn to certain people? Why am I getting the ick from certain people who are like perfectly nice and check every box? Like, why is he making me have the ick? Why is the one that is ignoring me the one that I'm obsessed with and giving me all the flutters? What is it that I believe about myself? What is it I believe about relationships? How I know that this thing triggers me, and how can I manage that so that I can be operating from my higher self instead of my wounded younger self? That's the inner work.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. And one thing that I see as a pattern in a lot of people who are dating is they fall for narcissists, and they don't realize at the beginning that the person they're falling for is a narcissist, because narcissists often tend to be very magnetic,
Yes, I
right?
know. I have a lot of firsthand experience with this. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so can you talk about that? Like how do women, how do people look out for, like, what are some signs that they can look for, and how do you get yourself out of that trap of falling for a narcissist
God,
over and over again?
this is a tough one. I mean, first of all, you want to really understand what narcissists are. And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions and there's a lot of different types of narcissists. So it's very important to just understand what it is. And once you do, like I could spot one from a mile away. So first, typically they love bomb you. And the reason they're love bombing you is because they're gaining control over you. So you always want to make sure that, I think there's Sabrina Zohar is a coach, and she, the way she says it is like the ouch has to match the pinch, or something like that. Like,
Mhm.
there if he is so like, oh my God, you're incredible, you're the woman of my dreams, you really want to look at, okay, like, we barely know each other. How can he possibly know that right now? And then this alternates with a cycle of devaluation, where they'll start to devalue you and you think that it's your fault. And you felt so good during that love bombing phase, because love bombing feels amazing. Like, who doesn't love being love bombed? It's
Totally.
incredible, right? And so you'll do anything to get that back, and you'll put up with anything. And then you will get it back, but then it will be taken away. And then you're in this alternating cycle of idealization and devaluation, the cycle of being stressed, the cortisol, and then getting that hit of dopamine when he's nice again. So that's something to watch out for. You also need to watch out for somebody who cannot take responsibility for anything. He is the victim in the world. Everybody else is the bad guy, and he's the good guy. Everybody else has wronged him, and he is just a wronged and wounded soldier. Another way narcissists can try to control you is by making you feel sorry for them. And then, a lot of women fall into what I call the excessive compassion disorder, like this empathy trap of like, oh, like, he's been so hurt and I want to heal him. So that's something else to watch out for. They also, like, narcissists don't love themselves. They actually hate themselves. They just have overinflated egos that are very fragile. They have this image of how they want to present themselves to the world, and they will protect that at all costs.
Mhm.
So narcissists don't relate to people as people. They relate to people as a means to an end. It's a means to feeling good about myself. And that's why a narcissist, and what happened to me in my relationship with a narcissist, is that, he was in a bad place in his life, and I fed his ego and I helped him and I loved him like so intensely. And then once he started to get his act together, he just dumped me and left me for somebody shiny and new. Now I interpreted this as like, oh, I just wasn't good enough, that same similar theme that we talked about. But really it's that, no, she was just a better source of narcissistic supply. They'll always treat people like pawns, and all they are interested in is feeding their own egos. They also gaslight. I mean, look, I could do a whole podcast episode just on this.
I see that.
They
It's great.
also will gaslight you, meaning they cause you to question your interpretation of reality.
Yep.
They make you feel crazy for feeling the way you're feeling.
Yep.
And if you are someone who grew up not being emotionally validated, where your emotional needs weren't being met, where you felt like you were just too much for expressing certain needs, then you will be gaslit very easily into thinking, oh, like, yeah, he got angry at me because I upset him, and I should have done this, and I should have done it this way, or whatever it is. And so the end of a relationship with a narcissist is so devastating, because not only do you lose this person, but like, you lose yourself. You completely lose yourself in the relationship. You lose your ability to trust yourself. You lose the ability to trust others. So you really want to watch out for someone. Key takeaways: somebody who has no empathy, is completely self-serving, and is either obsessed with you or completely discards you.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. That we
Mhm.
could, we literally should do a whole episode
Oh
just
my
on
God, I
like,
know. I have so
you
much to
know.
say. I need to write a novel about my experience someday.
Yeah, me too. Me too. As you were speaking, I'm like, oh yeah, that and that and that.
Yeah.
That sounds
Yeah.
familiar. And I do think it's worth to add from a manifestation perspective because I always share how we attract who we are a vibrational match for. We don't
Mhm.
manifest what we want, we manifest who we are. And
Mhm.
so if you are attracting narcissist after narcissist and it's a pattern, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are a narcissist, but what it can mean is that you have a certain imago or an image that is in your subconscious of how love is supposed to look, right?
Yeah.
And it can mean that you either had a parent who was an extreme narcissist, maybe you had a parent and a sibling, right? I get that a lot with
Yeah.
clients who they have a parent and a sibling. They were surrounded by narcissism from a very young age. So their definition of love got equated to narcissism. And so
Mhm.
it's very subconscious, and who they end up attracting is in accordance to that imago, that image they have of what love looks like. And so in the free webinar that we're going to be putting out there, which by the way, I'll share a link in the show notes of this episode for how you can sign up for the webinar. We're going to be really experiencing what it's like to create a new electromagnetic field in yourself, like a new energetic system, so that you no longer keep attracting the old patterns that you used to attract, right? And so it's a super powerful way to kind of energetically shed that habit. Yeah. Okay.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Incredible. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I know from my experience growing up prior to meeting my husband, oftentimes when a relationship would end, I would somewhere deep down want to get my ex back,
Mm.
right? And now I'm not with any of them, so it was kind of
Mm.
like a futile effort. Maybe I should have just kind of like dropped it the first time we broke up and not gone for the chase of trying to get them back. Is it ever worthwhile to try to get an ex back, or is it better to move forward and focus on new possibilities?
Okay, well, look, you can absolutely make it work with an ex because I did marry my ex, but there's a few things that need to be considered. First of all, like in our case, we dated in high school and then we started dating again like 11 years later. So we were not even the same people anymore. I think for the most part, no, it's not worth trying to get back together with an ex. You broke up for a reason, probably several reasons. And if there's any chance of it working, there needs to be changes that are made on both sides. And change takes time and change takes work. And normally people try and get back together for the wrong reasons. They try to get back together because they love each other or they miss each other, and that's not enough. It's not enough to compensate for fundamental incompatibility. And that's the main reason why people break up. They're fundamentally incompatible. They can't work together. They can't communicate effectively. It's so much easier. It's like the problem is like it comes down to the sunk cost fallacy most of the time. You've already invested all this energy in this person and he knows you and he knows your shtick. And when you break up, you're like, oh God, I have to go back out there on the apps and I have to start all over and I have to go on first dates. I don't want to do that. Like, I want to get back with him. A lot of the times it's a bruised ego. It's feeling it's that old wound that rears its ugly head, which most of us have, the I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I need to prove that I'm worthy, so I need to get him back. Most of the time you're setting yourself up for a situation where you just break up all over again. And then you're on again and you're off again. The only way it can work is if you go through an extended period of no contact where both of you, not just one of you, are working on yourselves and really working on the issues and what went wrong and how we're going to fix it and what is our plan and how do we know that this time is going to be different. But first you need to be away from each other for like months, probably many months, and then you have to see where you stand. But you need to get the ex out of your system first. You have to completely detox, and that takes being away from this person for a long time. You have to be away from them. You have to get them out of your system. You have to like it becomes an addiction in a way, especially if it was a toxic relationship. You can become addicted to that person. So you need time away for like the dopamine and all those chemicals, the oxytocin, for all of that to just like flush out of your system, and
Mhm.
just space to really focus on yourself and reassess what it is that you want. And most of the time with time and space, at least what I see with my clients and my followers, is that They don't even want that person back after, but you're not able to see that clearly once you're still in the thick of it. You need extended period of no contact. You need to do the work. And now if each of you do the work and emerged changed in ways where you could fit together a little bit more seamlessly, then yes, maybe it could work. But after a breakup, it should never be your intention to get him back, even if what you want, even if you think this is your person. Your intention should always be, how can I move on from this? How can I move forward? We can't invest in some sort of fantasy future. You have to plant yourself in the present and what you have right now, and lean into what your current reality is.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And for those who are listening, who are in a process of heartbreak or just having broken up with a partner,
Mhm.
and you're in that place of fear of like, will I ever find somebody else? Will I find someone new? Will I find someone better? Right? Or will I be single for a long time? Like Sabrina said, do I have to get back on the dating apps now and get to know a person from scratch all over again? And wow,
Mhm.
that takes so much time. Like the whole concept of time, you know, a manifestation principle here is all about time bending, right? We become masters of time when we learn about the mechanics of time. And
Mm.
so part of like the hypno activation, which I'll share the exact activation in the webinar we do that I used to manifest my husband in just 21 days, because what I want to say is I was, full disclosure, engaged to someone right before I met my husband. And when I called off that engagement, right, of course, for a second, I entertained thoughts of like, wait, now I have to put myself back out there. But right away, I quantum leaped and I entered into a new reality that said, I know that I know that I know I'm getting married by May of this year. Right. And I made a conscious commitment. I wrote it down on paper. May of that year was my date. A month after, I gave myself a month to really like energetically heal from that engagement. But then I got to work and for 21 days in a row, I did my own hypno activation. On the 21st day, I met my husband. Okay. And this is just a month and a half after I broke off my engagement to someone.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Okay. Met my husband on the 21st day of doing the hypno activation. We were married by on May 29th of that year. Right. And so, does this happen all the time for everyone? Not necessarily, but I've seen it happen time and time and time again. If you enter into alignment with the methodology, right, and you get into like manifestation mastery, you can really, really accelerate the amount of times things take. So, just thought that was a nice little like extra to what Sabrina just shared.
Well,
Um,
and that's something that I mention a lot, for women who are feeling frustrated and they're worried about the timelines. Your life can turn around so fast. So fast. I know, like, again, it comes down to perspective. Yeah, you could look at it like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to swipe and swipe and swipe, and then it's gonna take a while before I find the right person. Then we're gonna have to date for a while, and who knows if that's gonna last. Instead, have a perspective of, look, I could leave my house tomorrow and go to the coffee shop and like meet my soulmate there. And things can just flip, life can flip the script so quickly. I see it, I lived it. First of all, I was single as can be, like when I was 29 years old. And when I was 30, all within the year of being 30, I got engaged, married, and pregnant with my first baby. Like life can turn around so quickly, but it doesn't serve you to engage in the mentality of like, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen, because then that's what you're going to attract. Then you're going to stay stuck in the fear. And when you're in the fear, you're going to make decisions that are fear-based decisions, meaning maybe you'll force yourself to go out with a guy who is not your person, but you're like, well, I gotta find someone, gotta find someone. And then you're gonna feel dejected and you're gonna feel hopeless because you're like, oh, that date was a disaster, a date that you never should have even been on in the first place, because you're making decisions from fear, as opposed to, okay, I'm gonna say no to this because I know that I just know that this isn't right for me. And I know I am going to meet my person. I'm telling you what I've seen and what I experienced in my own life and manifesting my husband is, as soon as I got out of that fear-based place, and as soon as I was in a place of being so sure and so confident I was going to find my person, that's when I found my person. And that is the biggest gift that I give to anyone in any of my courses, my programs. Is definitely, we'll talk about this in the webinar that we do, is the gift of getting rid of the fear.
yeah.
The fear is the killer. Getting rid of the fear and being able to just know with certainty that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm calm, I'm relaxed.
Yeah. And I want to say, I love that. When you come from that place of inner certainty, like it's an inside out job, when you come from that
Mhm.
place of inner certainty, you end up attracting a partner who also knows what they want, right?
Mhm.
Because what do we see again and again? And I'd love for you to actually talk on this is, women get into these relationships with men. And the relationship can go on for years and years and years sometimes. And then finally, the woman's like, what's going on? Why isn't he? Where's the ring? And then when they finally have a serious conversation about it, the guy's like, oh no, I actually don't actually ever want to get married and I don't want to have kids. And it's like, what? It took you 3 years to tell me that?
Right.
So what would you say? Well, I do want to, before I ask the question, when once I got really clear that I knew what I wanted and I put pen to paper, the man who I attracted, who is now my husband, he was also dating me for marriage. He
Mhm.
wasn't dating me to take me home and get into my pants. Sorry. Like he just wasn't. He was there because his goal was I am looking for a woman to marry and I want to raise a family. I want to have kids.
Mhm.
And we dated for 2.5 months and then we were engaged for 2.5 months. It was all of 5 months from knowing him till our wedding day because we were so clear. But
Yeah.
what would you say to someone who's in a relationship where they want to stay, they want to marry their partner, and their partner wants to stay in the relationship, but can't necessarily commit to marriage? What advice would you give them?
Well, first, I guess this advice is not helpful to the person who's on year 3 of their relationship, but for anybody else, you want to make sure the person's on the same page as you, and you want to do that as soon as possible. That does not mean you're saying to them, like, oh, I'm expecting a ring, like, this month. It just means, like, is it, you just ask him, is it within your plan within the next few years to settle down, get married, and have a family? Like, is that something that you want out of life? Don't be scared to ask the question. Like, women are scared because they're scared that they're going to hear an unfavorable answer and then they're going to have to end it with this guy, and they don't want to because they don't want to go back out there. Don't be afraid. Set your standards, stick to them. Okay, so now for the one who's in a relationship for 3 years and he just wants the relationship and not the marriage. The first thing I would say is to have empathy. So we want to have empathy for him and understand where the marriage aversion is coming from. What is it he's afraid of? Is he afraid that, like, they're going to end up divorced and she's going to, like, clean his clock and take him for all he's worth? Is he divorced? Well, has he already been divorced? Or did his parents have a very nasty divorce? If somebody is completely opposed to marriage, there's a reason for it. So first, instead of getting angry, we want to understand, like, where's this coming from? Like, we've been together for 3 years. You know me, I know you. Like, what's the issue? Next, you need to figure out, okay, what can I live with and what can I live without? Do I absolutely, is marriage, being married, a non-negotiable for me? If the answer is yes, okay, fine. That is your standard. Now, you and your partner will hopefully be able to work together to get to a place where you can be in a relationship that makes both of you happy and satisfied. That means coming up with a game plan for whatever it is he's nervous about in terms of marriage and what that means and what that represents. Can we work together to work through that? And hopefully you do have a partner that wants to work through it. And if he's like, no, I don't need this, then he's not committed to you in the way that you need a life partner to be committed to you. And
Mhm.
if that's your standard is I want to be married, then, and he is not willing to work with you on getting there, then probably need to leave the relationship.
Yeah, a hard one to swallow, but important one, really important. And okay, so we have time for like a couple more questions. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so I have because there's one that I feel is really important. And I remember seeing a flyer for a dating workshop, and the flyer said, never settle,
Hmm.
never settle. And I have a lot of mixed feelings around that because you know what? Like, I find that as as a person who works with couples, and you also work with couples, there is always going to be something that involves settling, right? Like, it's like you're not finding Mr. or Miss Perfect. You're
Hmm.
finding Mr. or Miss I'm willing to do the work and grow together. And that means that we are by definition not necessarily complete. There is still work to be done while we are in human form.
Hmm.
And we call it settling down for a reason, right? The word settle is in settling down.
Right.
So, what would you say around this idea of like these women who really want to be married, but they can go well into like their 40s or 50s, let's say, and they're not wanting to settle. right? What
Right.
would you say to what, forget being in their 40s or 50s. Like you could be in your 20s, 30s, 40,
Yeah.
what would you say to these women who are kind of scared of settling down because the guys they think that they're settling?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because that is definitely something that comes up all the time. The biggest fear that I see with women is a fear of ending up alone or a fear that they're going to have to settle. So, this is why it's so important to have your list, your foundational list of must haves and deal breakers and preferences. So you have to have the ironclad, like this is something I absolutely need and this is something that I will absolutely run away from. For example, like if you cannot tolerate anger or somebody being super critical, then you see that side of the person that you're dating, you know, okay, this is a no-go for me. This is a no-fly zone. It brings up too much for me. I can't be with someone who's overly critical. Some women can be with a critical guy and they can laugh it off. I'm definitely not one of those women.
Mm-mm.
So, okay, you need to make sure that you have your standards. And then when you're dating, you need to look at how you're showing up on the date. Are you being present and looking for the connection that's there and the good in the other person? Or are you picking this person to shreds? If you're picking the person apart, and this is a pattern of yours, it's not about not settling, it is about fear. It is about fear, probably fear of being vulnerable, of being hurt, of being rejected. It probably goes back to a story or a limiting belief that you're holding on to, which is that, well, all relationships end for me. Nothing good works out for me. I'm just speeding up the inevitable. You have to look at the root of what's going on, of the behavior. Because I've seen women say, like, oh, I was on a date and he's a really great guy and he's amazing. But like, I really don't like his taste in music. Like, I don't know if I could date someone who like is so obsessed with country music. I'm like, are you out of your mind? Like, that is so insignificant. This is so insignificant. Fine, if you're on a
Mhm.
long car ride and he wants to listen to country, just put your AirPods in. Like, sometimes women will pick at the smallest things.
Mhm.
And so you have to have your overall picture of your must-haves, your deal breakers, and like the things that maybe are your preferences are the night this would be nice to have. You also need to make sure you're not being insanely picky. And you also have to be realistic in that no one is going to have it all. We're all going to have to settle in some areas. You're not going to get the guy who's the CEO, alpha, multimillionaire businessman who's also like a soft teddy bear. Like that typically, those two things typically don't coexist. Can you find that? Maybe, but like sometimes you have to look at what is it that I value more. And a lot of the times, a person's greatest strength is a hint of their greatest weakness. So you might love a guy who's like super alpha, super driven, super, focused and organized, but he might not be the mushiest person. And if you need a lot of mush, then this might not be the man for you. You have to realize that, like, okay, I'm going to have to compromise in some areas. You have to
Mhm.
have an overall vision of what do I want my life to look like? What do I want my home to feel like? How do I want to bring up my children? And you also have to think about the stress test, okay? The stress test is imagine your like nightmare scenario. Maybe it's we're at the airport with three little kids. One of them puked all over himself, and we have to catch a connecting flight. And then we found out there's like a 10-hour delay and we're stuck in the airport. Who
Oh,
do I want by my side that is going to, that I'm going to have to deal with this with? Like, who do I want to be there? I want the man who I can trust to be like, you know what? Don't worry. Like, you sit here. I'm gonna go clean up the kid, and I'm gonna figure this out. I'll figure this out. It's okay. I've got it. We're a team. We're in this together. Because that's what life is. Life is a series of we either missed the connecting flight, we got a delay, we're stuck in traffic for 5 hours with like three screaming kids, and we just have to cope together
yeah.
and get through it. That's what matters more than anything else.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's just so validating. We actually were on a almost 40-hour flight with both of my kids when they were like
God.
2 years old and 4 years old. And
Oh,
it was like I remember in a moment, one of my daughter like pooped her pants. We like literally we were stuck in airports for like 10 hours. It was just
it's
pure
horrendous.
torture. Yeah, it was
Horrendous.
real craziness. And my like daughter pooped her pants, my son threw it was a whole thing. And just like I remember seeing my husband just on it, like on
Yeah.
it. I was exhausted. I was just emotionally depleted. And my husband just picked up the pieces. And I remember thinking to myself in that moment, you know what? I won the lottery. Like this is what it's about because this
Yeah.
is life. This is
Mhm.
life. And I think that just really puts things into perspective for our listeners because I think everybody wants to get married because they want to fill the void or heal a wound, right?
Mhm.
And while sometimes that can be a compliment to marriage, it shouldn't be the reason a person gets married,
Right.
right? Because then it's going to be a really hard reality when like the kid does throw up while your other kid is screaming, while your other kid poops her pants, you know? And
Right.
so can you work together as a team? And is this the person you want to go through the challenges with? And there's not to like demystify what it means to be in lifelong love with someone.
Right.
There's so much beauty and commitment and caretaking and love and support. But it's all of it. It's the yin and the yang, right?
Right, right. And so I think back to like the guys I was always drawn to, and they were always like bad boys and exciting, and they had like a certain like chaos around them, and that was so exciting to me. Like it felt like, I was living in my own movie, but I'm like, I could never do life with someone like that because that fades.
Yeah.
That gets old real quick.
Oh yeah.
And then you're just stuck with a messy person.
Yeah.
And it's life is hard.
Yeah.
Whether you want kids, you don't want kids. I mean, especially if you want kids, like life is freaking hard. It is hard. You need a partner who will be by your side to weather the storm with.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
have to focus on who do I want to do life with, not who makes my belly, like my stomach, flip in 1,000 circles. Because again, that's not always the healthiest thing. Who do I want to do life with?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And that said, that brings me to, I think, my last
Mhm.
question, assuming nothing just like sprouts after this.
Mhm.
But do you believe that there is someone for everyone? Assuming that a person wants lifelong love, is
Mhm.
there a someone for everyone?
I do believe that. I believe there is a lid for every pot, and I'm going to share a story on this. Okay.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite stories. So a while ago, I went out a very long time ago. God, I've been married for not like almost 10 years by this point. So when I was single, I went on a date with this guy who was just insufferable. I think we actually went on 2 dates. And I remember at one point I looked at my watch and then he lectured me and he was like, you know that you should never do that. Like that's so rude. You're on a date and you're looking at your watch. And I'm like, I feel like I'm being scolded by like a teacher. And I vividly remember thinking in my head, who is ever going to marry this guy? He's the worst. He's insufferable. Like, get me out of here,
Oh my
okay?
gosh.
Years before that, when I was on like a learning program, I met this girl and she just irked me. Like, I found her so annoying and so insufferable and just nitpicky. And everything she would say, I would just be like, shut up. Like, she was so unlikable and annoying. And I vividly remember thinking, who's ever going to marry this girl? Like, she's just too much. I don't know how, but somehow these two found each other. They found each other from separate parts of the world,
What?
found each other, got married, have children, like, you know.
What? That you need to write is that in your book? I hope that you wrote that in one of your books.
I should. I'm actually friends with him on Facebook. So like I check in on them every once in a while. I'm like, these two, unbelievable. So the point is, yes, there it doesn't mean that like it's not just the insufferable people. I do believe there is someone for everyone. I really do. I do not believe it is ever too late. I feel like the women I work with and who usually fall into two categories. It's either like late 20s or early 30s, starting to panic, want to find their person, want their friends are getting engaged. And then I also work with the have already been married, have adult children,
Mhm.
divorced, starting over. And they're always so scared it's too late. And it is not too late. The
Mhm.
women in their 50s I work with have just as active dating lives as the women in their 20s. And if anything, it's almost easier for them because I feel like people are done with the BS and like the games and everything.
Mhm.
So it's not too late.
I mean, that just reminds me of a client of mine who came to me when she was 46, I believe, 45 or 46. She had been dating for 20 years.
Oh God.
20 years looking for her person, right?
Wow.
And there was a blockage there that was in her blind spot. And so we got to work. She did the hypnoactivation process. We did a little bit of like inner like excavating of what the blind spot is, what the blockage was. I kid you not, a month later, she found her person. They
Wow.
got married. Okay, this is after 20 years of dating. Okay, they got married. Today, they live they are the cutest. When she posts pictures of the two of them, it's like the way they still look at each other. They've been married now for a number of years. The
Uh-huh.
way they even look at each other, it's like they're on their first date. You can see
Oh
the
my God.
sparkle in their eyes. It's really sweet. So,
Wow.
not to say that you're going to be searching for your person for the next 20 years, but
Yeah.
the point is it is possible. It's even probable. If you want it, you do the work, then Sabrina and I are on the same page. There's a lid for every pot.
Okay, well now my question is this hypno activating. Are you going to be teaching us this in the free webinar?
1 billion%.
Okay.
This is like the my secret sauce to manifesting, because it's a real combination of hypnosis. So you go into a trance state, not the type of hypnosis you see when you go to like a circus and the guy's
Mhm.
on the stage clucking like a chicken. That's not what we're doing here, right?
Right.
But we're getting you into a trance state where you're a little bit more open to suggestion, which is where I then insert neuro-linguistic programming, certain types of
Ooh.
language that your subconscious can then receive and reprogram and do the rewiring of the neural pathways and the nervous system. And then we do a whole visualization, right? Because manifestation is all about living as your future self now. That's how you access the quantum field, the field of infinite possibilities. And by doing that, you actually code that field, that realm, with all the information of your future self, therefore drawing it into your 3D reality. So
Oh,
I
I'm
can't,
so excited because
yeah.
I have things I want to manifest. So it works for other than manifesting a soulmate. We can work together.
Everything.
Everything.
I work with clients who want to manifest financial abundance, who are
Wow.
going through some sort of like physical impairment or like some sort of dis-ease in their body or chronic
Right.
pain, anything. This webinar that we're offering for free is specific to manifesting lifelong love.
Right.
So the link will be in the show notes of this episode. We hope to see you there. And if you miss the recording, the link will also take you or if you miss the live, the link will also take you to the recording of it. So either way, it's a win-win for anybody who wants to take all the material that they received here in this podcast even further. We really want you all to access the magic that is available to you, because I just believe that if you want it, you can have it. And that's really what it comes down to, right?
Oh, amazing. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So thank you, Sabrina. I always feel like with you, it's just we're two girlfriends having a conversation. You
Yes.
make it so easy.
Oh, thank you. Well, so do you. This is so fun.
So fun. All right, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks for listening. And we hope to see you in the webinar.
All right.
All right.
Amazing. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining me on the Manifestation Method. I hope today's episode has inspired you on your journey to authenticity and abundance. Remember, your transformation begins with your mindset. If you're ready to take the next step, visit ayeletpolonsky.com for more resources and guidance. Until next time, here's to your rising.